Here's my audience. I have my little sister Ella, my dad Greg, and my mom Jeanette. For my individual communications-related speech, I chose to give an informative speech on interpersonal communication. Throughout my speech, I'm going to define what interpersonal communication is, as well as give examples. I will also be going over 3 key aspects that play into interpersonal communication, those being gender, personality, and culture. So interpersonal communication is defined as the process by which people exchange information, feelings, and meaning through verbal and nonverbal messages. Interpersonal communication typically takes place between 2 people, but could also be incorporated with a small group. Examples of interpersonal communication include a parent speaking to their child, a teacher speaking to their student, an employee speaking to their employer, and the examples go on. The first section I would like to talk about is culture and how it plays into interpersonal communication. Culture is defined as the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular people or social group. When we think of culture, we typically think of a large group of people who share the same values, lifestyles, and rituals. Like larger cultures, we also have our own unique cultures that are in our interpersonal relationships. But how are those unique interpersonal cultures developed? That ties into something that is called relationship schemata. Relationship schemata is defined as what guides us and how we believe our interpersonal relationships should work out and how we create them. What that is basically saying is that our unique interpersonal cultures tie directly into the larger cultures that surround us. Our relationship cultures are related directly to the life experiences that we have developed from our larger cultures. Think of those aspects that play into our unique interpersonal cultures as building blocks. We bring those aspects, or building blocks, into our interpersonal relationships, allowing us to connect that culture that we develop to the outside world. So although the relationship that you have with someone is unique, they are built upon a larger pre-existing culture that surrounds you. Next, I'm going to be talking about gender and how it ties into interpersonal communication. We often look at how differently men and women communicate, and although that may be true, the differences aren't that serious. For example, women can be more nurturing and sentimental, while men tend to be more authoritative and task-oriented. Although those are differences between men and women, the key differences that we see within their communication is how they perceive the messages that lie in between the lines of an interpersonal communications. When I say in between the lines, I'm talking about how each gender perceives the message that is found within a conversation. Women tend to listen to the more sensitive in between the lines aspects of a conversation, which is why people often argue that women are more often than men pay attention to the meaning of a conversation. Men are more sensitive to the authority and independence that lies between the lines of a conversation. Cynthia Torpa, an educator in family and consumer sciences at Ohio State University, in her article titled Gender Issues, Communication Differences, and Interpersonal Relationships, gives 3 examples of a husband speaking to their wife, a husband and wife speaking with each other. In those examples, we will be able to discuss what the in-between-the-lines message both the husband and the wife are perceiving in the conversation. The first example is a husband speaking to his wife. He says, "I'm really tired and I have so much work to do." She responds with, "Me too, there just aren't enough hours in the day." He then responds with, "There you go again. You never think that my contributions to this marriage are good enough." Within this conversation, we can see that the in-between-the-lines message that the wife is perceiving is that she understands what he is going through and that he is not alone in this situation, while the husband is perceiving that she isn't she isn't any better than he is, and that the contributions that she makes aren't any better than his. The second example is a wife speaking to her husband. She says, "I'm really tired and I have so much work to do and I don't know how I'm going to get it done." He responds with, "Why don't you take the day off and rest if you are so tired?" She then sarcastically replies saying, "Thanks a lot. You think my contributions to this household are so trivial that I can do nothing and the differences won't even be noticed." In this conversation, we can see that the between the lines message that the husband is perceiving is that he wants to help solve the problem that she's dealing with and that he knows something that might be helpful, while she's perceiving that he has no idea what she's going through and that he doesn't understand how she is feeling. And then the last example is again the wife speaking to her husband. She tells the husband, "Call me when you get there and let me know that you have made it safely." He replies with, "That's ridiculous. Nothing bad is going to happen, and if something does happen, you will know about it." Within this conversation, we can see that the between the lines message that the wife is perceiving is that she is connected to her husband, she cares about him and she loves him, and she cares for his safety and well-being. While the husband is perceiving that the wife just wants to know where he's at and who he's with at all times, and that she doesn't genuinely care about his safety. From these examples, we can see that it is important to understand that men and women perceive interpersonal messages differently, and by acknowledging those differences, we can find clarity and understand that men and women perceive messages between the lines differently. The last section I would like to talk about is personality. Personality is defined as an individual's way of thinking, feeling, and acting based on traits. Communication is an important part of your personality because communication is how you express your personality. When we think of personality styles, there are two major personality styles they are introverts and extroverts. Introverts tend to be more shy, while extroverts tend to be more outgoing. Introverts prefer to work alone and tend to keep opinions to themselves. They prefer written communication. Extroverts are very outgoing and enjoy communicating and sharing their opinions and ideas. They often think out loud. Within our interpersonal relationships, we tend to get along with people who share similar personalities as us. For example, an introvert is more often attracted to another introvert, whereas an extrovert is more attracted to another extrovert. Although they may be different personalities, we have found that they can still work together. It is important to understand that although we all have different personality types, we can all learn different skills from each other in terms of communicating interpersonally. Throughout this speech, we've been able to talk about what interpersonal communication is. We've been able to define what interpersonal communication is, and we've also been able to give examples of interpersonal communication. We were able to talk about how culture ties into interpersonal communication by defining culture and talking about how our larger cultures tie into our interpersonal cultures. We're also talking about how men and women tend to perceive messages differently within interpersonal communication, and we talked about how they perceive the between the lines messages. And finally, we were able to talk about how those with different personality types are able to communicate interpersonally with each other. Thank you.